and I cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my head and I cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
Attention, post colors. Everybody please rise. Okay, would everybody recite after me the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Don Gardner. I'm the post commander for Post 39 out of Orangeville. I just wanted to do a little bit of history for our military. For 250 years, when their country is called, the men and women of the United States military have answered. It began in 1775, June 14th, as America's militia men besieged in Boston. Congress ordered the creation of a new army, the Continental. The birth of the United States Army was born. 4 months later, on October 13th, the Navy was born. And on November 10th, the United States Marine Corps. Declaring independence, Congress pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, and through the revolution and generations since, American service members have lived out that pledge. And they have sacrificed 80 years ago, World War II, more than 400,000 lost to war, 36,000 to Korean, 58,000 from Vietnam. I can't read it. Sorry.
Just talk louder.
Okay. And 7,500 in operation since. Memorial Day is their day. The United States military, most sacred day at the National Memorial Day Parade along Congression Avenue, and at parades and ceremonies all around the country. We honor those who have gave their last full measure of dedication. And as we commemorate the 250th birthday of the United States military, to all that have served and to all that have sacrificed, we offer you our lasting gratitude and our pledge to always remember. Thank you.
Next, we will have a musical number by Jessica White, and she'll be accompanied by her mother-in-law, Lael White. After which, our speaker for the evening is Kent Powell. He grew up in Huntington, and he's graduated from Emery County High School in 1964. He's married to Brenda Dabel. Did I get that right? From Afton, Wyoming. Kent earned degrees in history from the University of Utah. He worked at the Utah State Historical Society from 1969 until his retirement in 2013. Before his retirement, he was senior state historian and editor of the Utah Historical Quarterly. Some of his books include The Next Time We Strike, and if I remember right, you did a presentation here on that. Labor in Utah Coalfields, 1900 to 1933, Utah and the Great War, the Beehive State and the World War I Experience, Utah Remembers World War II, and Splinters of a Nation. German Prisoners of War in Utah. This Veterans Day presentation will highlight a group of soldiers from Emery County and elsewhere who served in the four major wars of the 20th century, World War I and II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Jessica?
you'll apologize my sitting on a stool tonight. I've had a few health issues that I think maybe some of you can deal with. The sciatic nerve is kicked up again, and as I read through my presentation, after about 10 minutes, it felt like it was time to sit down or lay on the floor. So, and since I've got a presentation that probably lasts about 4 hours, well, maybe not quite that long. We'll go with it. But thanks to Reno and Jessica for the musical numbers. Reno's dad and I grew up together, Kay Truman, and we took our kids out to Kay's place to ride horses when Reno's dad was just a young man, and we thought we had seen him again when we walked in tonight, but Kay has talked about, can I say bragged about Reno and his talents, and so that was a real treat for me to hear him play tonight. Well, when Cynthia asked me to speak at this Veterans Day meeting of the Historical Society, it was easy for me to suggest a topic that I've been interested in, been involved with for some time, and that is soldiers I have known. It was an easy topic to come up with, but the hard part of it was coming up with those people to talk about in the short time that we have tonight. There's just simply not time to recount all of the experiences that I wish I could. And so I've selected 8 individuals. All but a few of them are from Emery County, and they served in the major conflicts, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Some of these men are relatives. I have a cousin, an uncle, and a brother that I'll be talking about. So this is a little bit autobiographical in the sense that my relationship to them is very close. But also a couple of individuals I went to school with that, thank goodness, are here tonight. And if I relate something that may not quite be true, I'm sure they'll correct me on that. The others that aren't from Emery County are people that I've encountered doing the history research that I've been involved with. So let's start with World War I, or it was known at the time the Great War. And we don't have time to talk about all of the causes and the course of all of these conflicts. But World War I did begin in Europe in 1914 when Germany invaded Belgium and France, and the United States remained neutral until 1917 when it joined the Allies in the fight against Germany. It took nearly a year to mobilize the American forces and send our doughboys over to France. But once the American soldiers arrived in France, the war seemed to come to a quick end. The American troops made a big difference, and also the supplies and the equipment and the arms that America furnished were also critical. And the war then came to an end on November 11th, 1918, 107 years ago. My uncle LeVar Gunderson married my mother's sister, Daisy Grange, in 1934, 16 years after World War I, and just 6 years before his death in 1940. Uncle LeVar and Aunt Daisy had 2 sons, Canyon, born in 1936, and Bennett Ray, born in 1940. He was born just a few months before his father passed away. I was born 6 years after Uncle LeVar died, so I didn't know him personally. However, when my mother went down to speak and visit with my Aunt Daisy, I always tagged along, and if Cannon and Bennett Ray were there, then I would head out to their bunkhouse, which was behind the house, and they would entertain me. But when they were gone, and they were gone off and out on the desert doing the things they like to do, then I would sit in the living room and look at my uncle's World War I books. And I was simply fascinated by these books and by the story. I didn't understand clearly what had gone on, and later learned a little bit more about my uncle LeVar. But I learned that LeVar Gunderson had served in the 91st Division, which consisted of approximately 20,000 soldiers. The division was known as the Wild West Division because most of the soldiers came from the western states. By late July 1918, all elements of the division were in France and participated in the last major offensive of the war along the Meuse River and through the Argonne Forest. And during that campaign, the 91st Division had 850 killed and more than 3,700 wounded. And one of those wounded then was my uncle LeVar. He was overtaken by the lethal mustard gas used by the Germans to try and halt the American advance. I don't know anything about the care that he received or his return from France or the disability pension he received from the federal government. But as you can see, there's certainly a lot more for me to learn about my uncle LeVar. He died on October 25th, 1940, at the age of 45. The fact that my uncle was a casualty of war made a profound impression on me. I did look up his obituary in the Emery County Progress and found a front page article in the November 1st, 1940 issue that offered some interesting insights into the character and the service of my Uncle LeVar. Let me read from that obituary, or the account of the funeral services. Services were conducted by Bishop Perry Wakefield in the LDS Ward Chapel at 2 p.m. Monday for LeVar Gunderson, 45, former mayor of Huntington, who died in a Salt Lake hospital Friday of an illness induced by injuries received as a soldier during the World War. Mr. Gunderson was credited with an excellent record during his one term as mayor, 1937 to 1939. Ill health prevented him seeking re-election last December, although he had wide support. He had sponsored several of the most important community projects Huntington had received in a number of years. Mayor Gunderson was born at Mount Pleasant on January 9th, 1895. He served in France during the World War as a member of the 362nd Infantry, 91st Division, Company L. He lived in Hiawatha before moving to Huntington and won many friends in Carbon and Emery counties because of his philanthropic nature. On a number of occasions, as soon as he received his federal disability check for war service, he spent part of the money to buy clothes or other gifts for unfortunate people of his acquaintance. I thought that was a very fine tribute to him. And LeVar Gunderson is certainly one kind of veteran that I wish I had known personally. The second World War I veteran I want to highlight is someone I met in my early days of working at the Utah State Historical Society. Nels Anderson was the author of an important book, Desert Saints, The Mormon Frontier in Utah. And at that time, I did not know that he had been a soldier during World War I and that he had left an amazing diary of his experiences during the war, and that I would have the privilege of editing the diary for publication by the University of Utah Press. Nels taught for a short time in Price and was teaching in St. John's, Arizona, when the United States entered World War I. He reported for the draft and was allowed to finish the school year before leaving for Camp Funston, Kansas. The 314th Engineer Regiment sailed for France in June of 1918 and arrived in time to participate in the two major offensives, the San Miguel battles of September 1918 and the Meuse-Argonne offensive almost a month later. This was the last American offensive of the war, and the same one in which LeVar Gunderson was wounded. So I'd like to read a few excerpts from the diary that I think gives some insight into the life of a soldier and the interesting diary that Nels Anderson wrote. He writes about death. As we passed by the Red Cross in Romange, they gave each of us a bar of chocolate and box of cigarettes. Philip and I were walking together. I tried to trade my box of cigs for his chocolate. He wouldn't, but started to eat it and said perhaps it would be his last. It was too. An hour or so after, he was killed. I mentioned Phillips because we were intimate friends. He was homesteading in New Mexico, was engaged to a girl from there who was living with his mother in Kansas, waiting his return. I thought about how many thousands and thousands of experiences our soldiers had as they lost a comrade. Talking about civilian refugees, there was a little town on this side of the Meuse River that, according to the natives, the Germans just left during the night. They told the French to get out, for they were going to shell the town. I'll never forget those poor people leaving. They were mostly old men and women and children, many of them tottering and feeble. They were carrying heavy bundles and wheeling barrels or pulling wagons loaded with their treasures. Some of the children were crying, and the babes would not be soothed by us. They were afraid of soldiers. And the end of the war, end of World War I, he describes this way. So this is peace, and I am alive. I am so surprised I don't know how to act, so I just sit and think. I don't feel like yelling. No one is yelling around here. How good it is to be alive. I had set aside all hopes, and now they assert themselves one by one. I have a future again. It is the greatest thing to live for. I was glad to get into the fight, that my future would not be an apology. As you can see, what a relief for him as the war came to an end. Well, during my time at the Utah State Historical Society, I had the opportunity to do a number of interviews with World War II veterans. Some of them were included in a book entitled Utah Remembers World War II, which was published as part of the 50th anniversary commemoration of the United States entry into World War II. There were approximately 72,000 Utahns who served during World War II, and just a little over 800 from Emery County. So you can see if we tried to talk about all 800, that would take a good evening. And so I've selected two people that I would like to talk about for World War II. The first is Walter Staff. He was a person that I interviewed for this book, Utah Remembers World War II. He joined the Navy in 1940. He was assigned to the USS Oklahoma. That battleship arrived in Pearl Harbor 2 days before the Japanese attack on December 7th, 1941. He was below deck in the compression room when the attack came. He described his experience, now quoting from the interview. There were 4 or 5 of us there, and we got another hit. It shattered the lights, and we were in complete darkness. Somebody had a lighter. It gives off a lot of light when you are in total darkness. We were going up the hatch. Then it was just like a waterfall. All of a sudden, you're in water. Of course, you hold your breath and feel around and hope you don't hit an overhead where there's no place to go. I came to, and my buddy was there with me. We were the only 2 that made it. We knew we were trapped, and we expected the air to be used up. We would just pass out, and we were resigned to our fate. We didn't see any hope at all, knowing where we were and everything. You lose all track of time, but we heard some tapping. 1, 2, 1, 2. When we heard the tapping, we tapped back. Pretty soon you could hear them working right above us. They drilled a hole through this little light, and this little light shined through. They are cutting away, and I'm watching the water below us. The water's coming up, and they are cutting. I thought the water was going to beat them. It was coming up, it was up around your waist, up around your neck. Then the water was running out where the rescue crew was working. When I came out, I asked it, "Is it dark already?" Tuesday morning. I had lost, but he found out that it was Tuesday morning. He had been for most of Sunday, Monday into Tuesday morning. I lost 20 pounds since I did not have anything to eat or drink. The fear and everything else had a lot to do with it. Walter's staff was the last of 32 sailors to be rescued from the Oklahoma, which lost 450 sailors of its 1,300-member crew. The next person I wanted to highlight is someone that might be a surprise to you, as we are here tonight to honor veterans of the United States Armed Forces. But I would like to recognize that among the soldiers I have known are veterans who were at one time enemy soldiers. And one of those was Helmut Horner, who served in the German army from 1939 until the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. I came to be acquainted with Helmut Horner after he read a newspaper article about research I was doing on German prisoners of war who had been sent to Utah during World War II. He wrote and asked if I would be interested in reading a diary he had kept while he was in the United States as a prisoner of war. I wrote back that I was very interested, and he boxed up a 350-page single-spaced manuscript and sent it to me. I had expected a small little journal that he had kept, but this was a pretty big book. Let's see. It was a fascinating diary, and I was able to translate it and find a publisher for it. Helmut was in the German army at the time of the invasion of Poland in 1939, the beginning of World War II. He participated in the invasion of France and Belgium in 1940, the Soviet Union and Russia in 1941, and returned to fight in France in 1944 at the time of the Allied invasion at Normandy. He was captured a few weeks after that and loaded up on a ship coming back to the United States and became a prisoner of war here. He was one of about 370,000 prisoners of war. I'd like to read his diary excerpt from May 9th, 1945. This was the time the German prisoners found out that Germany had surrendered and that the war had been lost. Quoting from Helmut's diary now. On the streets of the compound, German prisoners of war stand in rows of 5. It is 8 a.m. Officers of the American Army appear. Taking a deep breath, the oldest unfolds a sheet of paper, and after looking in earnest over the heads of the prisoner of war, he begins. The war in Europe has ended. The German army has surrendered unconditionally. The German Reich has ceased to exist. The German army is no longer bound by the oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler. With considerable satisfaction, the officer raised his head briefly and continues. From this point on, the wearing of the German uniform is forbidden. The same goes for the wearing of all emblems, insignia, and medals of the German National Socialist regime. The German prisoners of war in the United States will be returned as soon as the necessary transports are available. Without a word, the Germans return to their quarters. In silence, my friend and I unbutton our shoulder straps from our field jackets, roll up our German uniforms into a bundle, and step outside. A short time later, a hole about 3 feet deep lies before us. In an instant, our uniforms are thrown into the hole and quickly covered. As dusk lies over the land, it is as still as a grave in the camp. Like an unbearable load, the unbounded hopelessness lies on the souls of the sons of a people God has forsaken. and no light shines in their despair. For no purpose, everything was senseless. Every offering of blood and possessions from everyone is looked upon as useless. Finished. The Reich of the Germans, our fatherland, has ceased to exist. I just wanted to give his perspective, his experience of the war as we honor our own veterans today. Well, moving on, the Korean conflict and Vietnam had their origins in the settlement of the peace treaties and negotiations at the end of World War II. The Korean conflict, some argue, is still going on today, but the primary period of fighting was from 1950 to 1953. Vietnam came more than a decade later when the first U.S. combat troops arrived in 1965, and the last to leave nearly 8 years later in 1973. Whenever the Korean War comes up in a conversation or in the media, my cousin Grant Wilson comes to mind. Perhaps more than anyone else, he introduced me to the reality of war in a way that at the time I did not comprehend. I learned about his service in Korea in 1950 and 1951 when he was still a teenager and I was just a 5-year-old, not yet in kindergarten. Grant was born on March 23rd, 1932, the third child of 8 children born to Aunt Leela and Uncle Lem. Aunt Leela and my mother were sisters. I spent a lot of time in the Wilson home since the 2 youngest of the 8 children, Dale and Donna Kay, were the same age as my sister Connie and I. Grant passed away on March 18th, 2008, a few days shy of 76. Several years earlier, I had asked if I could do a taped history of his experience as a soldier in Korea. But instead of the interview, Grant volunteered to dictate his experiences, which he did by driving up Huntington Canyon to an isolated spot where he recorded his story on 6 1.5-hour cassette tapes. Grant saw action from January until October of 1951. He was involved in several major battles, the Punch Bowl, Bloody Ridge, and Heartbreak Ridge. He suffered at least 3 shrapnel wounds, one in his hand, his knee, and hip. But it was the fighting on Heartbreak Ridge that Grant stepped on a landmine that nearly blew off the lower part of his left leg. Only ligaments and some of the tissue in the calf held the leg on. After a 3-mile trip by stretcher, as he recounts, carried by Chinese prisoners of war to the MASH hospital, he was treated and sent to an evacuation hospital before he was flown back to the States, first to the Oakland Army Hospital, then Fitzsimmons Hospital near Denver, and finally Camp Carson Army Hospital near Colorado Springs. The doctors were not able to save his entire leg and convinced Grant that amputation was the best, if not only, solution. The amputation left Grant with a stub 3 inches below the knee. He returned home to Huntington in late November 1952. Grant's story concludes with an account of him being outfitted with a prosthesis in Oakland in April 1953, and quoting from Grant, "I know the fellow who made my leg was a German, a fellow by the name of Hittenberger. I will never forget that name. I was sent to him because he was an old German artificial limb maker, qualified to make the best knee, or bend knee, for the prosthesis." My first memory of Grant and his wound was Christmas of 1951, just after he returned to the States from Korea. Again, I was just 5 years old, but my mother and her sisters, Grant's aunts, collected money to buy a radio for their nephew. And it was a beautiful blue color, and I remember going with Mom and Dad down to Aunt Leela's and Uncle Len's to see the radio. And Grant talks about the radio and its history and how much it meant to him. As a 5-year-old, I remember how important the radio was, that Grant had lost his leg in a landmine explosion, but the tragedy of the event escaped me. I did learn that Grant was awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. Grant suffered with the aftermath of his war experience for the rest of his life, but he survived and succeeded thanks to the support of a wonderful wife, Nelda Peacock, who he married on September 12, 1953. Nelda had grown up in Orangeville. Nelda and Grant have 6 children. Grant went on to college, got his teaching certificate, and taught at North Emery Junior High School for many years. He served his community and church in many ways and was a fine example of perseverance and determination. And I am pleased to honor him with this small tribute tonight. The second Korea-era veteran that I want to mention is my brother Max Powell, who joined the Navy at the age of 18, 7 months after graduating from North Emery High School with the class of 1951. I seem to have been 5 years old when all of these events happened, but that's when he joined the Navy. I recently ran across a collection of letters he wrote home from the time he joined the Navy in January 1952 until he completed his boot camp in San Diego, his advanced training in Jacksonville, Florida, and his assignment to the Navy Air Station in Pensacola, Florida. Although his experience was far different from that of my cousin Grant Wilson and others who were in combat during the Korean conflict, Max offers some insights into what military service was like for an 18-year-old who joined up contrary to the advice of his parents and other friends. And perhaps his experience was similar to that of many of us who joined or were drafted who didn't serve in combat. The following are a few excerpts from my brother's letters, and so I hope you find them at least entertaining, if not informative. Why did he join? Well, for several reasons: patriotism, adventure, to see the world, and to impress the girls. His letter from February 5th. When the other boys were home and they were in the service, the girls flocked around them, and I was just dreaming for the day when I would come home in my Navy uniform. How many of you veterans here joined for that reason? I'd be interested to know. Should he have joined? February 14th. I'm beginning to think that I made a big mistake in joining. There's not anything I like about the Navy. I hope it's different when I get out of boot camp. What was boot camp like? January 11th. We get up at 4:30 every morning and go to bed at 10 o'clock. Then about every 3 days, we have to stand a 2-hour watch at night. So I'm not getting very much sleep. We practice marching, going to school, learning about naval discipline and jobs, about history, and we have a swimming class. Those of you not in the Navy, I don't suppose you had to go to a swimming class, but I have to learn the semaphore code, naval law, and how to roll my clothes all by Monday. Was he homesick? And what about home? January 20th. In boot camp, they try to break or rid you of homesickness in a hurry. They won't let you do nothing but what they tell you to do. They won't let you go to the show or have any recreation at all for the first 2 weeks, or even 3 sometimes. 6 months later, this life isn't too bad. It's just the thought of being away from home and not doing what you want to. And was that not a part of the military experience, not being able to do what you wanted to? The family at home, some of his requests of my mom and my sister. January 19th, send me some candy bars and homemade candy and a date cake. January 22nd, the homemade cake, cookies, and cake were really good, as well as the popcorn. January 29th, keep sending me packages with homemade candy, cookies, cake, and candy bars. February 12th, the boys really like your cookies and candy, also the popcorn. And one more, February 16th. Don't send me any more gum. I've got too much, and I'm not supposed to chew it. Well, some reflections about himself and advice to the family at home. at a time of reflection, he wrote this: "I want to apologize to you, Mom and Dad, for the way I acted the last few years when I was home. I realize now that you were trying to do the things that were best for me. I don't know why I act that way, but I'm really sorry I did." I thought that was good of him to confess that he wanted to repent and make amends. But to the rest of us, he offered this advice. To my dad, go to church. To Mom, don't worry so much about me. To my older sister, Arlene, don't join the military, but go to college instead. And to me, change my eating habits and be good to my little sister. I'll read from March 9th. He writes, "Has Kent started to eat better? I hope he has started to eat better. I know that if he doesn't eat more now, that something will go wrong with him in later life." And obviously that's the cause of all my problems now in later life. You've just got to make him eat. As you can see, I've changed my ways, especially after I learned what a good cook my mom was. And one more, August 23rd. "Tell Kent he better start being good and to leave Connie alone if he wants me to play with him and take him fishing and riding in my car when I come home." Well, I must have taken his threats to heart, because he did play with me. He did take me fishing and for rides in his car when he was home on leave. But let's leave my brother in Pensacola, Florida, where he spent more than 3 years of his remaining obligation and then came home to use the GI Bill to earn his bachelor's degree at Utah State University. Let me turn now to the last war I would like to discuss tonight, and the one that has had the most direct impact on me and my generation, Vietnam. If Mr. Johansson had talked about Vietnam in our American Problems class, I don't remember, but a year after my class graduated in 1964, Vietnam was becoming a familiar and worrisome subject, and the war would affect me and most of my classmates in one way or another. The first company of American soldiers arrived in Vietnam in March 1965, not even a year after our high school graduation. And I don't think military service had been on the minds of most of my classmates. But soon the draft and the possibility of combat in far-off Vietnam became our reality. The wartime draft was very unpopular with many. At first, everyone is eligible for the draft, right, Lee and Chal? Even those attending college. In time, student deferments were granted until graduation from college, and subsequently, the draft lottery was established in an effort to provide a measure of fairness in the process. There were 40 boys who graduated in our 1964 Emery County High School class. Some enlisted, some were drafted while in college. When student deferments became available, some finished their college degrees before being drafted. After the draft lottery was instituted on December 1st, 1969, some were drafted and others were not. I've identified the military status for 30 of my classmates. One served for 36 years on active duty and retired as a full bird colonel. Of those that I have identified, 13 did not serve in the military, and of the 22 who did serve, 6 went to Vietnam, 13 served on active duty, but not in Vietnam, and 3 in the Army Reserves. Those who did not serve had either medical or other deferments or a high lottery number. A draft story, and this is a very true story. 2 of my classmates that I had gone all through elementary and high school with lived in the same town in Huntington with me, served in the same mission at the same time, returned from their missions to attend the College of Eastern Utah together, and then Utah State University. They both married girls from the same neighborhood in Price, and then the lottery came along. One of them received the number of 365, and the other number 2. As you can see, it was something of a lottery or a gamble, however you want to look at it, whether you served or not. Okay. Chal Cook graduated in the first class from Emery County High School in 1963 in the class ahead of me. I had known Chal as long as I can remember. We lived on the same block in Huntington, Chal on the south side of the block facing the town square and the elementary school, me on the west side on Main Street across from the Castle Theater and Walt's Drugstore. Chal served an LDS mission to Texas. He met his future wife, Annette, at the College of Eastern Utah. They were married in 1968. A year later, he was drafted and sent to Vietnam. Chal was kind enough to give me a copy of an account of his Vietnam experience that he presented at a church youth conference in 2010 and again at a Veterans Day assembly at Emery High School in 2013. And with his permission, I'd like to read some accounts from that talk. Quoting Chal now, "I had the privilege and duty of serving our country to defend our freedom. While in Vietnam in 1969 and 1970, I had many close calls where my life could have been taken. But each time I felt a comforting spirit protecting me. Now was I scared? Yes, very much. I was a machine gunner in Vietnam. There were 3 machine gun squads in each company. We rotated and took turns in our search and destroy missions. So every third day would be my turn to walk point gun. But I soon realized that when we were in really hot gunfire, it was my squad up front protecting the captain. One day I asked my captain why he was always calling my gun to be with him in these heavy times. He said, 'Chal, there is something about you that makes me feel safe when you're by my side.' Well, I knew it was the power of the priesthood my captain felt because I had felt it many times too. I was very blessed in the fact that I had served a mission and was married before I went to war. I was a little older than most of the soldiers in my company and had religious experience. A regular company of soldiers has between 120 and 150 men. Most of them were 18 or 19 years old, while I was 24. Many of them had never been away from home before, and they came to me seeking comfort and friendship, which I hope I gave them. I was like an older brother to them. I taught many missionary lessons in a foxhole or under a shade tree when we could find one. Our company had a reputation for working quietly and capturing many prisoners. Every morning as we left our campsite, we left 5 or 6 armed men hidden in the foxholes. The enemy always seemed to be hungry and would come in to see what we had left behind. Then these hidden men would capture them. This particular morning, the enemy got away. This made us very nervous, and we were alert for an ambush. As we were going down the trail, everything was dead quiet, and we were very alert. All at once, it seemed like all heck broke loose. We all hit the ground in a circle, as we were so well trained, straining to learn the source of the disturbance. Then it dawned on us. We looked up in the trees and saw many, many monkeys that we had startled. Wow, what a relief. We had no ambush that day. Before I went to Vietnam, I had my dear friend Frank Hall, who was our stake president when I was a youngster and later stake patriarch. Frank Hall and my father give me a priesthood blessing. As I look back, I see that blessing was fulfilled in many ways. And let me insert here, right up to the day he left Vietnam. Chal continues. A helicopter was supposed to pick me up at 2 o'clock one afternoon to take me back to Cam Ranh Bay, where I was to be transported home. It didn't show up until 6:05 p.m., At exactly 6 p.m., we were under a heavy mortar attack. Mortar rounds were exploding everywhere. When the helicopter arrived, the colonels called me over the intercom and said, "Cook, here's your bird. I don't want to see you until we get back to the States." Child continues, "I grabbed my rifle and my rucksack and ran for the helicopter with mortar rounds exploding all around me. I remember seeing a mortar round hit about 10 feet to my left and front. I was very scared, but I dove for the doorway of the helicopter to get what protection I could. After entering the helicopter, I looked back. There was the mortar round, which had not exploded. I asked myself, why was that one a dud when none of the rest were? Immediately, the words of my priesthood blessing came to my mind. Right then, the Lord made known to me why that mortar was a dud. Then the Lord needed me back home. And about 17 months later, I was called to be bishop of the Wellington First Ward. Well, again, I appreciate Chal letting me share that. Lee Jeffs and I graduated from Emery High School together in 1964, and our paths have crossed quite often since then. And when I asked Lee if he had written up his Vietnam experiences, he said yes, and he had in fact written a life history and gave me a copy, which I read with great interest. And by the way, that would be a great presentation here sometime for the Emery County Historical Society. Lee, if you don't mind me volunteering you. But I am going to quote from his Vietnam experience. Quoting Lee now, "They let me come home on leave the last couple of weeks in July 1967. Pam and I did a lot of fun things during that time. There's still a tree up on East Mountain with our names on it, dated 1967. The freeway was just being built, so it was an awfully rough, rocky road. Oh, he had borrowed Ken Cox's truck and went out on I-70 to Green River at the time that the freeway was being built. We came back across Buckhorn Flat to get home. There had been a big rainstorm on Haddon Flat, and Haddon Wash was a torrent about 100 feet wide, 6 to 7 feet deep, of rolling mud. We waited for a while and turned around and went all the way back to Highway 6 and then through Price to home. Well, since reading that account in Lee's history, I've often thought Lee must have experienced with Pam a little bit of heaven here in Emery County before he headed off to the hell of Vietnam. Continuing Lee's account then, they put us on a bus and we headed for Oakland, California, where an old naval ship was waiting for us. 2,200 of us got on the boat and sailed under the Golden Gate Bridge, going west to parts unknown. It took us 14 days to reach Okinawa. We changed boats and it took 4 more days to reach Vietnam. It was a sad day going under the Golden Gate Bridge and watching it sink out of sight on the horizon. A lot of those men knew that they may never see it again, and a lot of them didn't. We reached Vietnam at night, and we could see up on the side of the hills the lights of towns and houses and firefights. We could see the tracer rounds being fired. I was scared. I was the machine gunner on the squadron commander's armored personnel carrier, known as an APC. In addition to the machine gun, I always packed an M16 rifle with me. We had other weapons, including a couple of grenade launchers, dozens of grenades, and lots of ammunition. I generally rode on top of our personnel carrier because of so many landmines around. I figured that if we hit a mine, I might get blown free because of the concussion, and those things was enough to kill you. I always wore my helmet and a hot, heavy flak jacket. One of my friends was inside his personnel carrier when it hit a mine and the whole vehicle flipped over on its top and burned. There was nothing left of my friend. At the compound, we were being hit by mortars and rockets all the time, but mostly all night. Some of those rockets would blow a hole in the ground big enough to almost bury a Jeep. Some of those lit pretty close to our tent, within 80 to 100 feet. The scar I have on my right cheek, on my face, is because I went face first into my machine gun when our armored personnel carrier came to a sudden stop from hitting a big rock. It knocked me out, so they called in a helicopter and flew me back to the compound and sewed me up. I used to ride on our armored personnel carrier. I would strap 2 cases of C rations on top of the vehicle behind my machine gun. It was easier to sit on those than anything else that I could find. Anyway, right after I was hauled off in the helicopter to get my face stitched up, our troop got into a firefight with some Viet Cong. When my APC got back to our base that night, those 2 cases of rations had been blown into pieces. Was I being looked after or what? We would take turns in the driver's seat. Once when I was driving, I pulled over a tree and a big green snake fell out right on top of me. It was about 6 feet long and its head was about the size of my fist. It wrapped itself all the way around my neck before it slithered off the top of the APC. Wow, I thought I was dead. I had to come to a complete stop to regain my composure. I think that's one that's going to go down in the family history, Lee. I don't know how many of our squadron lost their lives while I was there. I do know there were 33 of them one day. Just when I thought I had 2 days to go before coming home, the sergeant major came by and told me that a helicopter was leaving in 10 minutes. If I wanted to be on it, I better get packed. We flew down to Cameron Bay, where I went into a barracks to shower and change clothes. Just as I was taking my boots off, some guy came in and said, "There's a cargo jet that's headed for the States. It's empty, and if I wanted to ride, I could." There were probably 30 or so of us who rode sideways on the little fold-out seats for 11 and a half hours. We stopped for just a few minutes in the Philippines. So I was in my jungle fatigues and combat boots when we got to Seattle, and then Fort Lewis, Washington, where I was finally able to take a shower for the first time in a couple of weeks. Wow, was I glad to be home. I need to say again, Lee, from Lee's history, I need to say at this point that I know I am here today because of the wisdom of my mother, who had some she considered to be the most righteous people in Castledale come to our house and give me a priesthood blessing prior to my leaving for Vietnam. A lot of my friends didn't make it home. Some 57,000 people lost their lives. Well, I appreciate Lee and Chow being willing to share their experiences and allowing me to present them here tonight. And I think in behalf of all of us, I can express a huge major thanks for their service in Vietnam. And not only then, but all they have done here in Emery County in the, 50 some odd years since they returned. I'm honored to include them in the ranks of soldiers I have known and as friends. I hope I've left time tonight for some of you other veterans to share your experiences. And if you're not a veteran and have had experiences with brothers, fathers, husbands, that you'd be willing to share those with us tonight. And I'm going to end my part, go sit down, and turn the time back.
What an amazing evening. Thank you. I didn't take time at the beginning to have those of you who are veterans to stand up. Are there any World War II veterans? Vietnam? Korea. How about any past there? I don't know. Chris, what do you count your work?
Gulf, Iraqi freedom.
Okay. Any others in the Persian Gulf? Any other wars? Deployments? Thank you. Let's give you all a hand.
Please come forward and retire colors.